$900, but that's a pretty good price.
Yeah, for all the stuff that you get.
That's everything you get with it.
Leah Thibodeau is going to be giving a webinar on leading with and for compassion. So I will introduce Leah in just a minute, but let's just do a few agenda items, and then I will turn it over to Leah. If you have questions throughout the call, please don't hesitate to type it into the chat box. You can also, if you are on the phone, you know, I'll say that you can probably ask the question, but Leah, you let me know if you want things to be different. This is really, we want this to be a little bit interactive, and so if you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I think that makes for a richer call for everybody. I'm not sure if I introduced myself, but I'm Rebecca Vierhoff-Kiss. I am the Outreach and Education Officer at Serve Ohio, which is the Ohio Commission on Service and Volunteerism. And I am on the Programs and Advocacy Committee for ALIVE. So I'm excited to host today's meeting. Gretchen, did I miss anything here?
No, you are great. I think we can roll right into a presentation for today.
Okay, great. So like I said, we're excited to have Leah here with us. She's going to be really talking about the building blocks of compassion competence, which I think we could all learn a little bit more about, and I'm excited to hear her content today. I'm just going to give a couple sentences to introduce Leah, and then we'll turn it over to her. So Leah is the volunteer program manager at St. Joseph Food Program in Menasha, Wisconsin. She leads more than 300 volunteers in their mission of fighting hunger and sustaining hope. She is the president of the Wisconsin Volunteer Coordinators Association, and she loves to connect and support with colleagues from across the state of Wisconsin. And again, we're excited to have her here connecting with her colleagues from across the country. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Leah.
Well, hello, everybody. I am so excited to be with you all. I have to just share that the next few seconds are going to be the most nerve-wracking seconds for me because I don't have this shared correctly. So, okay, everybody close your eyes. Close your eyes, no one look, no sneak peeks. This is the best way I can think to get myself back where I need to be at the moment. We're almost there. Okay, you can open your eyes again. We are right at the beginning where we need to be. On this wonderful Wednesday, I'm so honored that you guys took a little time to be with me today. It's December, just after Giving Tuesday. I'm still feeling Giving Tuesday. You guys might be too a little bit. So the fact that you're giving an hour of your day to be with me, I'm very humbled and honored that you're willing to do that. And we're talking about compassion today, which is something I think we need to be talking about more and more. And yet I find that there can sometimes be some resistance. And Gretchen and I were just talking about that before we launched here today. Oftentimes, my colleagues will say, well, I work in nonprofit. Of course I have compassion. And I'm quite certain that we all do. But there are some foundational principles, I think, about compassion that when we start talking about them, it just allows compassion to really take root and grow and blossom in our lives and in our work. And that is my hope for our time together today. So I'm going to start out just sharing some pictures with you. These are some of the folks that I have the good pleasure to work with, some of my volunteers at St. Joseph Food Program, where we are working to make sure that people who are struggling to have their basic needs met always have access to good, healthy, quality nutrition. These folks come in and they are working day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. And the service that we provide to our community just would not be possible without them. Their work can be physically demanding. Their work can be emotionally demanding as well. And yes, sometimes we even have a little bit of fun together. And this is a great thing about the people that I work with. We're always up for a couple of laughs. But we do need to consider that the work that they do can be difficult. And over time, while I was with our volunteers at St. Joe's, I noticed that occasionally I would witness an exchange that just maybe stung a little bit. It just left me wondering if it wasn't possible for that exchange to have been, I don't know, a little bit nicer, a little bit more friendly. And sometimes it was even further on that spectrum where I might hear things that just were a little bit painful, not intentionally. These folks are all helpers. They identify themselves as helpers, as they rightfully should. But in time, some things can shift when we are repeatedly exposed to the sense of need of others. Some things within us can shift, and I began to recognize that as compassion fatigue. I started to see that in my volunteers, in my coworkers, even in myself. And so when I decided to dedicate my time to sowing the seeds of compassion throughout my community, I thought, okay, compassion fatigue is where I want to start. And I love having this discussion with people like you. We are leaders, and you guys, as I'm assuming most of us are volunteer engagement professionals, we are in a unique situation to influence multiple people throughout our organization. So I'm hoping that today you'll get some language and some ideas for how you can do that. And this is our plan, my plan for us today, how we will spend our time together. First, we will define compassion. Make sure that we are all on the same sheet of music with what we're talking about here. Then we're going to define compassion fatigue and how we can recognize symptoms of compassion fatigue. We will look at the building blocks of organizational compassion competence and the dimensions of that organizational compassion competence. And then we will look at some steps that we can take to build our organization's compassion competence as well as our own personal compassion resilience. So before we dive into that, I just want to do a quick check-in with Gretchen. Everything seemed to be going okay, Gretchen. Any questions I can handle right off the top of the bat?
Everything looks great. Keep going.
All right, here we go. We're going to start off with a group chat. So I'm going to encourage you guys to use that chat function. And I'm going to ask you to type in some words that come to your mind when you hear the word compassion. What are some words that come to mind? In
Leah,
terms of, yeah?
keep them off as I see them. Empathy from Rebecca says caring. Brittany says presence. Paula says grace. Empathy, for me, I would say understanding.
Wonderful. Yes, these are all some of the things that come to our minds when we think of the word compassion. And they're all very important parts of compassion. But as we move forward in this discussion, I just want to make sure that we're all really talking about the same thing. So we are going to define compassion. Now, I like to think of compassion as a dance. Okay, I like to dance like no one's watching. And to me, compassion is like a dance with 4 steps. And I'm going to give you guys bonus points. I've got a dance up on the screen here. If you can identify that dance in your group chat, we'll check in and see if anybody gets that correct in just a minute. But I like the analogy of the dance because compassion has 4 steps. And if you take out any of those steps, you could be out moving on the dance floor and having yourself a grand old time. But without one of those 4 steps, you're not actually doing the compassion. So I kind of like that analogy. So let's move this forward. What exactly are those 4 steps? Oh, there we go. Okay, first step is awareness. The first step of compassion calls us to be aware of suffering that might be going on around us. Now, I say around us, it can also be suffering that might be happening within ourselves, but for the purpose of today's discussion, we're going to have an outward focus. So we're going to talk about being aware of suffering that is going on around us. And in order to be aware of that suffering, we have to be doing a pretty good job of keeping our own stuff in check. If we are so busy dealing with garbled up issues of our own, it's too difficult to be aware of what's going on around us. So to up our awareness game, we need to be making sure that we are dealing with our own stuff well. That includes personal care. This is where a lot of talk about meditation comes into play as well. Although I just want to say, if you're not into meditating, you do not have to be a professional meditator to expand your compassion resilience, for sure. But we do want to make sure that we are aware of suffering that could be going on around us. Once we become aware of that suffering, the second step is inquiry. And this kind of has two different aspects, okay? The first aspect of inquiry is making sure that we really understand what's going on with that suffering. Okay, we've become aware of something. We want to make sure that we understand it. We're going to ask lots of questions. We kind of want to get to that point where if 100 people were describing it, they would all describe it the same way. And that brings in the second aspect of inquiry, which is checking our own thoughts about what we have become aware. We want to make sure that we are not introducing any bias, any extra judgment, even extra adjectives can kind of throw off our compassion game a bit. So with inquiry, we're making sure that we understand it, and we're making sure that we are free of any bias in how we look at that situation. That moves us into the third step. When we have that understanding, we have to allow ourselves to feel. This is empathy. And this is difficult, especially in our culture where we are more often told that, feeling too much is a bad thing, perhaps. So the notion that we have to allow ourselves to feel the suffering of others, that can be a little bit daunting. But allowing that feeling to set into our own bodies is an essential part of compassion. And finally, that fourth step occurs when we allow those feelings that we have allowed to move through us, those feelings move us into action. There should be some form of action taken to alleviate the suffering of which we have become aware. Or at the very least, we need to make sure that our actions are not increasing that suffering. Okay, so those are our 4 steps: awareness, inquiry, empathy, and action. Sometimes people find it even easier to think of this as see, think, feel, do. And if you take nothing else away from this webinar today, but see, think, feel, do, and you just kind of mull on that for a little while, that alone can start changing how you interact with others and even how you interact with yourself on a fundamental level. It's as simple as see, think, feel, and do. All right, so that is how we are defining compassion. Got to have those 4 steps, definitely got to have that action step. Now, before we move on, Gretchen, did you have any guesses on that dance?
No. Anybody want to take a stab at it? I'm going to guess, I'm just going to say foxtrot.
No, I have that it's a Roomba.
Oh, okay.
So not a lot of dancers in the group, but that's, my son saw me working on this slide and he started doing the steps. He's like, oh, look at me, I'm going. All right, good deal. We are set to move on. let's just talk a little bit about compassion in action, because that action step is so serious, so important, but it doesn't have to be like big monumental things. Compassion in action is as simple as holding the door open for someone. You know, compassion can even look like, you know, making a donation to an organization that is important to you. And most of us are working in the nonprofit sector, and I am guessing that many of us have the opportunity to express compassion really on a daily basis. So I just have a little poll here for you guys, just to get a sense. And Gretchen, I think you can launch this one. But the poll is, I believe that volunteers and staff at my organization have the opportunity to act compassionately on a frequent basis. Do you agree with that statement or disagree? And I think Gretchen has a poll that she can put up.
I do. I'm going to go right to it, and this is the Compassion One poll question. So I'm going to launch that, and basically you're just going to click a little button, yes or no, and I'll be able to tell when folks have voted. Good job, people are voting. And I'll just wait a few more seconds for more people to vote, and we'll be able to show the results here in just a minute. I know some folks are calling in on their phone, and they may not be able to vote, which is a bummer, but that's all right.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead and end the poll here, and I'll share the results.
Yeah, all right. Not much of a surprise there. If anyone disagrees with that and you weren't able to vote, send me an email later and we'll chat. Okay, wonderful. Now here's the thing. As I mentioned a little bit at the onset of this, I see that my volunteers and staff have the opportunity to act compassionately on a frequent basis. However, I also notice that sometimes there are some missed opportunities, is what I call these. These are moments where perhaps an exchange was maybe not as kind as it could have been. Maybe it was not as thorough. Maybe it didn't fully address the need that was presented. And sometimes maybe even it stings a little bit, the way that interaction goes down. So I'm curious, I have another follow-up poll right away for you guys. I'm wondering, have you witnessed missed opportunities for compassionate action at your organization?
Okay, I'm launching the poll, and so the same as the last time. Well, folks are clicking in right away. That's great. And we'll just give a few more seconds here. Well done. Thank you, everybody. We'll go ahead and show the results.
Well, okay, so I'm in good company, which kind of personally makes me feel good. I thought, boy, if everybody disagrees, then that would be kind of awkward. But it shows that, you know what, this really is something that is deserving of our time and our attention. So hopefully today we'll have some ideas about what we can do to lessen the frequency of these missed opportunities. Okay, you guys, these missed opportunities can be a sign of compassion fatigue. All right, so let's just define compassion fatigue here. This is an indifference to charitable appeals on behalf of suffering people experienced as a result of the frequency or number of such appeals. So this is what happens when we are confronted with a sense of need repeatedly. If you have volunteers that are with you every week, every month, and they're doing this year after year, even ourselves as staff members, we can start to fatigue from being in the face of that. And you notice it's not a pessimistic sense, it's not anger, it's a sense of indifference. And that really has a certain feeling, or perhaps lack thereof, in and of itself. You see here, there are a couple of different names for compassion fatigue. We're talking pretty much about the same thing. However, when you get to secondary or vicarious trauma, those can be very serious. I see that most often in my colleagues who work at the Sexual Assault Crisis Center, where many of their volunteers have some kind of personal experience with something like that. And so when they're working with someone who is suffering in that context, that can trigger their own trauma. And that can really require some professional help. So if you experience any of these symptoms, please know that there are good people willing to talk with you and help you work through some of these things. So how do I know if what I'm experiencing is compassion fatigue? Well, there are some symptoms that we can look at, okay? First, we have some psychological symptoms. With these, maybe, I've just been more negative lately, more easily frustrated, irritable, or annoyed. I might have difficulty feeling warm emotions toward other people. Maybe I feel like work has hardened me. My sense of humor has changed. Boy, do I have a story about that one, but for the sake of time, we'll have to move on. You might find that, you're more resentful and a little more angry, and you certainly are enjoying work less. Those are some of those symptoms. Physical symptoms. You might have an increase in physical concerns. Generally speaking, you're not feeling as well, but maybe you're not sure why. Your health is just not as good as it used to be. Then we have some behavioral symptoms. Here we might notice that we have a change in the way that we respond to negativity or violence. We could have trouble making decisions, a decreased desire for intimacy. We could be more angry with a little bit of a shorter fuse. Or maybe we're turning to unhealthy coping mechanisms more frequently. So these are some of the symptoms of compassion fatigue. Now, before we move forward, I have another poll here for you guys. This is a true or false. What do you think? Burnout is another name for compassion fatigue. When you think about those symptoms that we just mentioned, is burnout another name for compassion fatigue? Do you think that's true or false?
Well, people are voting. Very good. Thank you. And I think this is going to be a good question. You're getting some good responses. Give just a few more seconds here. We'll end the poll. Here come your results.
Ooh, a little more blended this time. All right. So it looks like most of you guys said, yeah, I think burnout is probably another name for compassion fatigue. Well, I'm here to tell you today that they're actually different. They look a lot the same, okay? They can have you looking like this gal in the picture right here. Both burnout and compassion fatigue can leave us kind of feeling like this. However, burnout stems from something structural about your job. Okay, so this can be things like doing repetitive work or being asked to do work for which you are not adequately trained. It could look like having to work in an open office space where you gotta hear everybody and all of their little idiosyncrasies, things like that. Whereas compassion fatigue stems solely from your repeated interaction with people in need. So they're like really super close cousins, and yet they are different because burnout, when we think about burnout, those solutions have a certain identity. There might be things that we can do to manage those kinds of characteristics of our work, or maybe it's that we end up leaving to find a different job. Compassion fatigue, the fixes for that are going to look a little bit different. So it's important to separate those out a little bit. Let me give you a little example here. I think we have that coming up at my organization, okay? Burnout might sound like complaints about floor mats. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I work with a lot of different volunteers over the course of the week, and they all like things their own way. We have floor mats. Some people like the floor mats, some people don't. Some people want them gone forever. It's kind of like this never-ending thing. We get so creative when we try different things, but everyone has an opinion about the floor mats. Now, if someone who says, you know what, I just cannot handle the fact that you guys can't get these floor mats right, I'm gone. That would be super unfortunate. Hopefully I would be able to coach them and retain them, but that would be a burnout issue, okay? Compassion fatigue might sound like this. When someone's working with a client and they might say, you know what, I need to see the documentation. Just spare me the story and just show me the documentation so we can move on. Or one time I even heard this, you know, we really have to watch about how nicely we treat them, or before you know it, they're going to expect things to be served on a silver platter too. Okay. Those kinds of things stem from repeated interaction with people in need. Now, someone who's upset about the floor mat, that could be masking compassion fatigue. So I have to be really aware. Again, I'm going to be working on my awareness skills to make sure that and my inquiry to make sure that I really understand what's going on there. But hopefully you guys can get a sense of the difference of these things, because that is going to kind of paint the rest of the discussion here. So if we allow those little instances of compassion fatigue to go unchecked, what can happen is that fatigue can actually kind of infect your entire organization as a whole. And the next thing you've got is an organization that is compassion fatigued. So let's take a look at what that might look like. And for this, you guys, I'm using the words volunteer and staff kind of interchangeably, because again, we're in a unique situation where we can impact volunteers, yes, but also our coworkers. So, okay. Symptoms of organizational compassion fatigue. Maybe teams are not working well together. Folks might be breaking the rules. Maybe people are not respecting or meeting deadlines. You might find that people are inflexible or reluctant to change. Perhaps the volunteers just don't believe improvement is possible, that they just don't even think things can get better. And you might notice that there's no single cohesive vision for the future. So some of these are signs that compassion fatigue could be affecting your organization as a system. On the opposite end of that spectrum, when we are really working compassion into how we function, we start to get some of these strategic advantages. Innovation goes up. Quality of service improves. We see more collaboration. We are retaining the people that we want to keep. Our volunteers are feeling more engaged. And overall, people are more adaptable to change. Now, these sounds like the kind of things that we want in our organization. So let's take a look at how we can do that. We want to look at the compassion competence in the organization, and that is the extent to which an organization successfully and efficiently directs its resources to address sources of suffering and alleviates suffering throughout. So when we talk about compassion competence at the organizational level, we are looking at the resources and how we use them. And I know suffering can seem like a little bit of a hard word here, but in compassion speak, so to speak here, that is kind of the word that we use. You could say discomfort, dis-ease, things like that, but really we're looking at addressing and alleviating suffering. Within an organization, there are 5 building blocks of compassion competence. The first is social networks. With social networks, we're looking at finding ways to make sure that our volunteers and or our staff have an opportunity to work with people in smaller social groups. Doing so gives folks the opportunity to build deeper personal connections with a smaller number of people. That way, when they are volunteering for your organization, if they have something going on, if they're suffering in some way, they will have that small, closer knit group of people with whom they feel comfortable sharing that suffering. Because we can't really practice compassion, again, unless we are aware. So looking at the social networks within our organization can ensure that people know at least one person that they would feel comfortable sharing some difficult information with. The next building block is our organizational culture. This basically asks the question, are we valuing the people in our organization as much as we value donations, as much as we value hits on social media, things like that? Not only is it just the question, do we value people in the same way, it's do they know it, right? So that's what sets up the organizational culture. The next building block for us is roles. When we think about the roles that people play, are we addressing compassion and compassion fatigue at that individual role? What might it look like if you're using a position description for volunteers right now? What would it look like to incorporate compassion within your position description? What might it look like to address compassion fatigue in the position description? How are we discussing that in training, in performance evaluations? There's a really good opportunity there to be building compassion competence individually at that specific role level. The next building block then is routines. Routines give people a sense of familiarity. This kind of works hand in hand with social networks. When there is a routine going on, people will know when there is an opportunity to share some kind of suffering that they are experiencing. So at St. Joe's, at a certain point in our service day, we stop and everyone comes together, and we'll have our individual networks, our little individual work groups, and everyone comes together. We have a moment of prayer that's followed by announcements, and then volunteers are welcome to share things that might be going on. So it brings in aspects of the social network and the routine. Everyone knows when that's going to happen. So there's an opportunity there for people to express and share things that might be troubling them, thus opening the door for some compassionate action. And last, but certainly not least, the final building block of compassion competence in the organization is with its leadership. And this is why I'm so happy to be talking to you guys today. Again, we are in a really unique situation as leaders. We can impact our volunteers, which then impacts how our clients are served, and we also can impact our coworkers, our decision makers, all the way up to our board of directors. So I just want to go a little bit deeper into this leadership and what that can really look like, okay? You'll notice that today's webinar is called Leading with and for Compassion. So I just want to straighten out the difference between those two. We lead with compassion by modeling compassionate action. We lead with compassion by doing the things, right? We are the role models. We lead for compassion by allocating organizational resources to expand compassion competence. So when we lead with compassion, we are doing that because we are walking the talk. We lead for compassion by making sure that we are influencing how our resources can be used to continue to expand compassion competence throughout the organization. So a couple of ways that we can do that. It really, you guys, it comes down to storytelling, really effective leadership in this regard. So we can share stories of times when our own missed opportunity might have caused suffering. If we notice that we had an oops moment and we see that we could have done something better, and we can be humble enough to admit that and share that with people, that can be a really great learning opportunity for others. We can also share stories of someone else's compassionate action and really lift that up, highlight that, let people see that as a way to inspire future action. But here's a really important leadership tip. These two things cannot get kind of switched around, right? As leaders, we are not going to call out someone else's mistake and try to use that as the example. We're not going to throw somebody else under the bus. Now, unless someone comes to you and says, you know, hey, Leah, I know you talk about compassion all the time, and oh man, I had this total missed opportunity, and I just want to share that with you. And if it would help to share that with people, then cool, please do that. In that case, fine, share the story. But we're not looking to kind of surprise people by sharing things that maybe they wouldn't be so proud of. And on the other hand, we also don't want to be like braggadocious about things and talk about all these wonderful things that we did. If we're going to use examples of improvised compassionate action, let that be someone else's story, again, with their permission, that you can lift up. In all of these different storytelling modes, what we are doing is expanding people's view of what is possible with compassionate action. So leadership in regards for building organizational competence has a lot to do with storytelling. Now, before we move on to how we can continue to build on these building blocks, I have a little quiz for you guys, okay? Gonna show you this. If you remember, these are some of our 5 building blocks of compassion competence. There are 2 left out. Gretchen has a quiz for you to see if you can identify our 2 missing building blocks.
All right, folks, here you go. Oh, very good. A couple more votes coming in. This is great. All right, I'll give folks just a little bit longer here. We've almost got all of our votes in. Thank you, everybody. Oh, this is great. I definitely like that last one. Okay, I'll go ahead and share the results. Here you go.
All right, wonderful. Okay, so the 2 that we were missing were social networks and routines. So a little tricky on the routines and resources, because resources is a word that we've been talking about a lot, but the building blocks are social networks and routines. And yes, holiday treats never hurt, right? Okay, thank you so much, you guys, for participating. I want you to have those 5 building blocks in your mind as we move forward, because right now we're going to move into the 4 dimensions of compassion competence. Now, here's the thing. I don't know about you guys, but even our organization is kind of caught up in this, the metrics, right? It's almost like, don't bother doing it if it can't be measured, because you got to have metrics for everything, it seems like. So what's really cool is all this compassion stuff, there's metrics for that. That's kind of cool. These 4 dimensions of compassion competence are all things that can be measured. So if you want to measure your compassion game, go for it. Let's take a look at what these 4 dimensions are. The first is speed and time. This looks at how quickly we respond to suffering when we become aware of it. Okay, so if someone, let's just say something tragic happens and they lost a loved one. Okay, maybe a loved one has passed away. How much time does it take from when we learn about this incident to when action can take place? Okay, so we found out about it on Tuesday, and by Wednesday we did XYZ. Speed and time of our response can definitely be measured. Scope. Here we are talking about the breadth of responses that you will make available throughout your organization. So when there is a certain circumstance that you would like to move with some compassionate action for, you have different options. Maybe it's everything from we send a card on one end of the spectrum to we have money that we can actually give to people to help them in certain circumstances. So it could be cards, making a meal, offering to babysit, being able to donate paid time off, up to we actually have a pool of funds that we could help you financially in this situation. That's the scope, the breadth of the different things that you will offer. The next dimension then is magnitude, and that's just how much of each of those things. How many cards will you send? How many meals will you make available? How much money is there? So the magnitude is just the how much of the different things. And then there's customization. Are you able to customize your response based on the person and the situation? Okay, if your response is we just send a card all the time, that's not customized, right? You're just doing the same thing for each person. If you can say, well, with this person, we sent cards, with this person, we made meals, with this person, maybe we had gift cards available or something like that. That's how many different times, different ways you were able to customize your response to someone's suffering. So all of these dimensions can be applied to each one of the building blocks. Okay, so everything there that we discussed before can be measured should you care to do so. Let's take a look at some steps then that you can take to enhance your organization's compassion competence. So first, we have encouraging formal and informal peer support. What are some ways that you can do that throughout your organization? That addresses the social networks building block. You can make sure volunteers know that they are important, valued, heard, and cared for. That addresses organizational culture. You can address compassion and compassion fatigue during recruitment and orientation and in your ongoing training. That takes care of that roles. You can address issues regularly in scheduled meetings and invite in some experts. So those regularly scheduled meeting times or trainings that you might have for volunteers, that helps address the building block of routines. And another example here might be connecting volunteers to the bigger picture of their work. That is how we as leaders can use storytelling and relationship building to really cultivate the compassion competence throughout our entire organization. All right, now, this is a little bit different, but I'm gonna just switch the lens a little bit to talk about our own personal compassion resilience. So when we look at organizational compassion competence, that helps at the full systems level alleviate suffering. When we talk about your own personal compassion resilience, that is a more personal thing. That is all for you. That is, how can you bolster your own ability to deal with some of the stuff that we have to deal with on a regular basis? So let's just take a look at that. Okay, first, to boost your awareness, can you find ways to be reminded that there's always pain in the room? At my organization, we talked about signs that we could maybe make to put right on the doors as we head out of our staff area into the area where our clients are being served. Is there a visual reminder we can put there just to help remind us that there's going to be pain out there? Let's just be aware of that. Then with inquiry, what can we do as individuals to learn more about common forms of suffering that occur within the group of people with whom you work? Learn more, make sure that you understand the suffering in a way that's free of bias. We can also create reminders that struggling people are good, capable, and worthy of compassion. This is something we talk a lot about in my compassion fatigue session, making sure that we are bringing positive default assumptions about people. For empathy, we can mirror people's feelings in a genuine way so that our presence alone is an act of compassion. I heard presence when we were talking about those words that we think of when we hear the word compassion. Somebody had presence in there. That indeed can be an act of compassion, just being present with someone. And finally, think ahead. What simple resources could you have ready, even if it's just a referral to someone or some other organization that might be able to help a person who's suffering. And again, if you've taken some time to learn in that inquiry stage about the common forms of suffering, that will help you know what kind of resources you might want to have ready for folks. That will allow you to take some action. And that way you have moved fully through that dance of compassion. If we kind of get hung up here in the empathy stage, we can actually have something that's called even empathy fatigue. And that can really wear us down. It is that action step when we take some steps, even if it is simple as just making a referral to some organization or someone who can help, that pulls us all the way through, makes that action complete, and allows us to move on. So just remember, as we take all of this information forward, I know it's a lot of information, but it starts with you as leaders in your organization when you see, think, feel, and do. So as we wrap up here today, I just have a quote that I think is very impactful. The capacity for compassion and empathy seems to be at the core of our ability to do the work and at the core of our ability to be wounded by the work. The work that we do for the people in our community is not always easy, but it is very necessary. I appreciate each and every one of you for the work that you do. I hope you take good care of yourself so that you can continue to do this good work. Again, thank you. And after this webinar is done, if you need to reach me at all, you can reach me at Catalyst Leah leah@gmail.com.
Thank you so much, Leah. Rebecca, I'm going to, oh, she's got some courses here, and I've got her email address here in the chat box if you want to send it. I did put in the chat box. I'll be putting the recording and a PDF of the slide deck in the live file archive so you can access later. And I'm going to go ahead and flip over the other presentation for you, Rebecca, to finish us up.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Leah. That was really informative. And I have a lot personally to kind of think about in terms of creating a culture of compassion. Does anybody have any questions for Leah?
This is Gretchen. I've got a question, and I'm wondering. You talked about that you do this, compassion fatigue for training for staff and volunteers, and are there good models for that you would recommend? Any good templates, or is this something you really recommend be built that really fits your organization's culture?
Gretchen, just to make sure I understand, so in terms of compassion fatigue, if people wanted to bring that to their organization, is there a particular resource that they might use?
Yeah.
I struggle because I do have some tools that I present in my workshops, but those are really kind of self-created as a result of doing an awful lot of reading and also some training that I have completed in compassion and in coaching. I will say that when you think about compassion at the system level, I have it in my sources slide of my presentation, a book called Awakening Compassion at Work. That resource is really great when we think about system level organizationally. It is written for really more a corporate structure, but very much can be adapted to us in the nonprofit world.
Thank you very much. Just a question. I worked in an environment where you're talking about some of the signs of compassion fatigue, and there were certainly some folks. I'm not seeing any other questions coming yet, so that's why I'm just asking some of my own.
I have a question, actually, Gretchen. So Leah, let's say that you did have this volunteer who said, "Oh, well, let's not treat, our clients too great because they'll, want things on a silver platter." How would you recommend dealing with that volunteer to help them with their compassion fatigue?
Sure. Well, I have found that the best way when you're confronted with that situation right away, and back when I heard this comment, I was not necessarily in this place. So I heard that comment and I just was like, oh my gosh, and I wasn't able to address it. I don't think I had the verbiage, the language to really understand how to address that. Nowadays, when I hear something that kind of makes me do a double take, I will just very openly kind of confront that in the moment. And I might say like, wow, Sue, that is a comment that doesn't seem very much like you. Can you just tell me a little bit more about that? So an open question of asking people to just share more. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? That can sometimes get people talking. And then as I get people talking, I put my awareness antenna up for any subtle other undertones that might need to be addressed. I don't want to call out my volunteers, but maybe some of you experience things like this too. In those kinds of conversations, I can even find undertones of some racism, some bigotry in there. And those things just need to come to the surface. We cannot address that fatigue until it comes to the surface. So in that case, I might say something like, wow, you know, I understand that situation can be really frustrating, but I don't really think that it has to do with a particular race. I see that sometimes a lot of different people struggle with these things. So when we talk about this going forward, I'm just going to make sure that we take race or gender or age or whatever it might be. We're just going to take that out of the equation and just have a more neutral conversation about it. And then people they sometimes feel a little bit called out. I try to very gently work around that then to make them feel comfortable as well. But if we don't address those things right away, they will continue to fester. So long story short, sorry if it's too late. Best thing to do when that comes up is start by asking that open-ended question. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? I'm not sure I understand.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else have questions?
There was one on the chat box from Paula, and I think you've addressed it, but just want to make sure. When you hear someone shift their attitudes towards the negative about client or the organization, how do you start to address it? I tend to pull them into my office for a chat.
Mm-hmm. Yep, if you're able to do that, if you're able to pull someone aside for a one-on-one. In my organization, sometimes those one-on-one conversations just kind of, you know, I don't have necessarily an office that I can pull them into. But kudos to you for addressing it right away as you hear it. If you put it off and think you're going to address it later, you're probably going to get busy. If you try to address it next time you see them, the context might be all out of whack. So just doing what you can right away is the most important thing.
Wonderful. Well, I've got just about 2 minutes left. So Rebecca, let's go ahead and on to the next slide so you can make the announcements.
Great. So I just want to say again, thank you to Leah for a really, really great conversation and a lot for us to think about. So coming up for Alive, the Alive newsletter will be out soon. So please make sure to keep your eyes open for that. And they're always packed with lots of really great information. So keep your eyes open for that. Our next Alive Academy session will be January the 24th. And this will be a session on risk management. So more details forthcoming on that. And the planning committee for the Alive Academies is working really hard on building out the sessions for the next couple of months, and we're really excited about some of the really great topics that we have coming up. So again, keep checking out the website, make sure you check out the newsletter, and we will make sure to communicate those sessions as we get them finalized. Speaking of committees, we are looking for additional volunteers to join some of our committees. So we're looking for membership, marketing, and the programs and advocacy volunteers. So in the newsletter, there'll be more information about each of those. But if you want to get a little bit more involved with Alive, I really encourage you to take a look at those positions and reach out to any of the committee members or to Gretchen for more information about that. New communities of practices are coming soon. So we have the multi-site community of practice as well as the rural communities of practice. So dates for 2020 will be forthcoming on those. So again, you know, keep checking back for new information about those communities of practice and the dates for 2020. So with that, I'd like to say happy holidays. I know that we all have busy times coming up and wonderful times as well. So happy holidays to all of you, and we look forward to seeing you in January. And one last thing, Sterling Volunteers, we want to thank for their sponsorship this year, who have been really integral in helping us with funding for our online webinars. So thank you to Sterling Volunteers. And with that, I think we are all set. Gretchen, is there anything that I missed?
No, Rebecca, you did a wonderful job, and just like to thank everybody, Leah, for a wonderful presentation, and Rebecca for hosting today, and for all of you for taking the time to attend. I know it's a very busy season, and our very best wishes to you, and we'll be talking with you soon.
Thanks, everyone.